Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma. I am geeked up, amped up, and ready for Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Tampa Bay Lightning. You know, I'm mostly a football guy here, but if you're interested in some hockey coverage, there's going to be some live streaming, live tweeting, and all sorts of fun stuff. Also hoping to hook up online with my buddy Rudy Reyes of the Rude Dog Radio Show. So if you happen to be a follower of Steel City Underground on Facebook and Twitter, and primarily this is probably going to be a Twitter thing, it's going to be a little more instant. Check us out over there. SCU coming to you live, probably right out in front of the Super Mario statue, the Console Energy Center tonight. And if you happen to be listening to this after Thursday, well, I don't know if I'll be happy or be sad. I don't have the crystal ball here, but I'm sure we'll have the show or whatever archived. So if I make myself look like a fool because I'm not quite as much the hockey expert, I didn't grow up on hockey like I did football and being a member of Steelers Nation here. And so, you know what, that's kind of where I'm going to leave that off because this isn't a hockey podcast. Of course, this is all about football, and I wanted to take some of your questions and answers, and the questions I did get and some I did answer, and if not, I'm going to be giving those answers today. But first, this little tidbit of news. The Steelers have announced that they're going to open the 2016 preseason. Well, they opened the 2016 preseason against the Detroit Lions at Heinz Field on Friday, August 12th, but those two teams, they're going to have a chance to, well, they're going to be able to knock each other around silly a little bit before then. I'm being a little bit facetious there. In fact, I shouldn't even make jokes like that. I just watched the movie Concussion the other day, and I made mention over writer Dave of the Steelers Sanctuary over on Twitter. We saw this picture of this guy on ESPN, and he looks like he's literally photoshopped in front of a bridge. And I'm watching this Concussion movie with Will Smith, and, you know, he plays a heck of a part. I thought it was pretty good. The movie itself, substance-wise, pretty cool if you're a Pittsburgh native. It's always cool to see these movies like Jack Reacher or, what was it, Russell Crowe, The Next 3 Days or whatever. And that was kind of my point when I brought up, like, everybody wearing the black and gold jerseys, and you get to see that kind of cool stuff. Tom Cruise put on the Pittsburgh cap. But you have this backdrop of Pittsburgh, and it almost seems like everyone and anyone could sit at any of these parks, like Point Park, or they're just in front of some industrial area with some bridges, and just everybody just kind of chills there just by themselves. And I was talking to Dave about this, too, and even with my wife during the movie, and it's just like, I think anybody could just Photoshop themselves in front of one of these bridges and people just think that's the way Pittsburgh is, but it's not. And aside from that, the knocking silly thing with the movie Concussion, really something you should take that I shouldn't joke about. So sorry if I've offended anyone out there, but the Steelers and Lions will get a chance to mix it up because they're going to hold a joint training camp practice. That'll occur on Tuesday, August 9th and Wednesday, August 10th. Just a few days before they play that Friday preseason game that opens up the Steelers' 2016 preseason schedule there. So, of course, training camp, as usual, in those practices will be held at St. Vincent College in Latrobe. Not sure how much of that's going to be open to the public. Some of them are. Some of them's a little more private. Depends on the hours and whatnot that you get there. But heading into today's Q&A, and speaking about the 2016 Pittsburgh Steelers, I had someone field me a question about how can I be so optimistic about a team that didn't draft really any offensive players, didn't seem to plug any holes on offense, and lost Heath Miller and Martavis Bryant. Whoa, whoa, and whoa. Just slow your roll there, pal. Gal. I'm not sure which gender you identify with there, but you have offended me greatly as a passionate, hardcore Steelers fan and a person who loves to talk my Pittsburgh football. Heath Miller's retirement happened just before the dawn of free agency, something that the front office needed to know. And when they found out, they went out and pursued and got Ladarius Green as presumably the new starting tight end in Pittsburgh. Will he be better, worse, or just the same status quo as Heath? That is to be determined, but if you look at it from a volume standpoint of what the San Diego Chargers used to do with Antonio Gates and what Ladarius Green was able to do in Gates' absence, and I'm going to tell you this, sometimes there's 32 NFL teams, okay? There's one I follow very close and know a lot about. One other one I know a lot, well, I know a lot about the divisional opponents too, but then outside of those 4 teams, some of this is just things that I read or pick up or otherwise. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I am a fantasy football player, and I'm also one of the daily fantasy sports players, or DFS, as you may know, as you see the commercials everywhere practically. You can't turn on a TV or open a magazine or website without seeing FanDuel or DraftKings. And Ladarius Green made me some money the first few weeks of the season last year when he was playing in place of Antonio Gates. So I think that the sky is the limit for this guy in a legit offense that features actual running backs as opposed to Melvin Gordon or Danny Woodhead or whoever they were throwing out there. They did not have a good offensive line in San Diego. Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback, but he's not Ben Roethlisberger. At least he has not achieved the same level of success as Big Ben has. So Heath Miller being replaced by Ladarius Green, I'm not going to sweat that. Now, for replacing Martavis Bryant, I think the Steelers the front office, they're never going to admit this or say this. So this is my opinion on the matter. Martavis Bryant, they knew ahead of time that there could be a potential issue and they could be without Martavis Bryant. They knew it last year. And you know what they did? In the 3rd round, they drafted Sammy Coates. Now, Sammy Coates may have sat on the bench and not had a whole lot of significant playing time last season. The most we saw of him was in the postseason, actually, especially in that Denver game since Antonio Brown wasn't available from the concussion protocol, of course, from getting knocked silly by, there we go again with saying knocked silly, right? But he did, and he likely saw stars, and he wasn't healthy or available for that game. And Sammy Coates, I thought, for the few grabs that he made and what he contributed to that game, don't forget, you have to respect the speed, you have to respect the route running. The things that Sammy Coates does on the field that you don't see statistically, and that happened in that game, made it better for the other players that were on the field. And I know Martavis Bryant was a part of that, and Sammy Coates is going to have to step up and do that. But we already have another guy that was signed before the beginning of that free agency period this year, also probably as a stopgap, or what was it, like 2 or 3 days between the news broke that Martavis Bryant was that failed a drug test or multiple drug tests and was going to be gone for the whole season. Right before that, Darius Hayward-Bay is signed to a 3-year deal. And we saw what life was like without Martavis Bryant the first 5 games of the 2015 season. So I think the Steelers can definitely weather the storm. Now, the thing that everyone forgets is all of these injuries that happen, all of these suspensions, Lev Bell being out for 2-3 games the beginning of the season with suspension last season, and then getting hurt in game 8 or 9 against the Cincinnati Bengals. And you had Martavis Bryant out for the first 5 games of the 2015 season. And you had Ben Roethlisberger out for like about 4 games worth of time in miscellaneous spots in other regular season games. And the Steelers are playing with like Michael Vick and Landry Jones. And you got D'Angelo Williams in there as a backup. And Heath Miller gets hurt for a game. And you're patching all these holes. And Kelvin Beachum gets hurt. And he's gone for the season. Marquise Pouncey doesn't even play in the regular season. Well, guess what, folks? With the exception of Martavis Bryant in all that list, and of course Beachum's gone too, but with the exception of that, and all these players are going to be back on the field. Those killer bees, the 4 guys, you got Brown, you got Ben, you got Bell, and you have Bryant. All 4 of those guys only played 21 total plays last season on the field at the same time. 21 total plays. That's not even like a half a game, okay? Depending on the team that you are. For the Steelers, that's not a half a game with their offense. They're going to play at least double those many snaps or possessions, okay? So, all 3. So you take Bryant out of that, and you just have AB, you have Big Ben, and you have Lev Bell, and they only played 58 snaps together all three of them because of the various injuries and suspensions and whatnot between Ben and Bell. 58 snaps, 21 with the main core. And people are going to make a big deal about Martavis Bryant. Well, yeah, he did step up when you didn't have all those guys on the field. At the same time, you didn't see the full firepower of this Steelers offense. And that's kind of like what the point is here. Maurkice Pouncey is back. We've already seen it here in the OTAs. This guy he's a monster. We're already seeing Le'Veon Bell playing pickup basketball games and rehabbing very nicely. Even though the front office and the coaching staff has been a little mum on the situation, they're going to nurse him along. Is there any doubt the work ethic of a Le'Veon Bell? Anybody who saw the ESPN special when he apologized for smoking weed and everything like that, and then recovering from a similar knee injury the previous season, this guy is all about being the greatest of all time, just like Antonio Brown is. They are positive influences, and they will do nothing but be Pro Bowl level and, in fact, all pro level caliber players that are going to raise the level of this team's offense. I don't really care that I love Heath Miller. Heath Miller's one of my all-time favorites, one of the greatest tight ends in this franchise's history. But you know what? I don't care that Heath Miller's retired. You have Ladarius Green, okay? And then Martavis Bryant being gone, okay, I'm disappointed, but I'm excited to see what Sammy Coates does. I think Darius Hayward-Bay has actually been fantastic in his couple years here. You know, we had the same sky is falling mentality when Mike Wallace left. You had the same sky is falling mentality when Emmanuel Sanders and Jericho Cotchery up and left and took their, 13, 16 total touchdowns with them to Denver and Carolina. And what still happened? This train just keeps moving forward. D'Angelo Williams stays healthy. You won't have to worry. Le'Veon Bell, they have that change of pace. Fitz Toussaint, this guy come out of nowhere. And yeah, despite the fumble that happened, I think you got to give a really big hand to him and what Jordan Todman did in the postseason without DW and Lev Bell there. So Ben misses a handful of games. You get all of these guys together and healthy. You have this offensive line. You have this coaching staff. The coaching staff, the same people who say fire Todd Haley, don't realize just what Todd Haley brings to this team as they continually fill the holes that continue to get created by various injuries and suspensions throughout a season. This team still goes 10-6 and still makes the playoffs last year. Yeah, there's a few things that had to fall into place. The Jets had to fail miserably and just blow up and implode in spectacular fashion. But that's okay. You know why? Because we still made the playoffs and you still beat the Bengals despite all of the things that are around that. This team overcome adversity in ways you couldn't possibly imagine with third-string running backs, fourth-string quarterbacks, and just a band of guys playing. You have Cody Wallace playing center for an all-pro Maurkice Pouncey. You got the big Sasquatch, I like to call him, Alejandro Villanueva, playing as the left tackle. And you're only going to improve that because you're bringing in Ryan Harris, who could play a swing tackle. You draft Gerald Hawkins, who's going to be a raw rookie that's going to get some time and compete. Mike Munchak, former head coach, a Hall of Famer, as the offensive line coach, is building a very good offensive line capable of doing it all. He is also going to rub off on these tight ends. Ladarius Green, if he has a problem with blocking, you don't think that that's going to happen between the tight ends coach and Munch? Oh, yeah. And I also mentioned how Jesse James, this is the guy we aren't talking about. I wrote an article specifically on Jesse James being the secret weapon in the Steelers offense. You could check that out over at steelcityunderground.com and just see where the production of Heath Miller was. And if that production is picked up mostly by Ladarius Green, and you try and stack JJ and Green in some of these, you have them almost in like a bubble type set or two tight end sets, you put one of them in motion, Green is going to open up this game a lot more than everybody thinks. And he's a big body player. Jesse James is 6'7", 260 or so as well. You got two big targets still for Big Ben to throw the ball to. I think Jesse James is not going to be another Matt Spaeth and just strictly use as a blocker. And in fact, I think that Matt Spaeth will actually find that his role is cut out a little bit. Getting back to Ladarius Green is going to open this game up. If Jesse James catches 2 or 3 balls, and one of those happens to be a touchdown every now and then in the red zone, this is going to be absolutely a phenomenal offense. It's not going to skip a beat, despite a loss of Heath Miller or Martavis Bryant. And as you see also, Richard Mann being the Steelers wide receiver coach since 2013, he has really worked well in getting all of these receivers up to speed. I'm very excited about this. As long as we stay healthy, this coaching unit has these guys ready to be the top offense in the NFL. And another question I was posed was David Johnson. David Johnson signs with this team, just released from the Chargers, a former Steeler himself, had some injury history, blah, blah, blah. Okay. More or less, David Johnson is like an H-back. He could play tight end and fullback. Well, that's exactly what Will Johnson was, and he left to go to the Giants. What exactly did Will Johnson bring to this team that, David Johnson can't do? And I think David Johnson is a bubble player. And you look at how you try and decipher which of the 53 guys out of the 90 are going to make the roster. And I think there is a spot for David Johnson, and I don't know if he's necessarily familiar still with all the schemes and stuff, but he's been with this team. He probably has some type of rapport, at the very least, with Ben Roethlisberger being there. But David Johnson could play the same type of role that Will Johnson does, or maybe Roosevelt Nix just does, and David Johnson's that bubble player that doesn't make the team. But that's where I do think that Jesse James could become another type of similar player that fills this role like a Will Johnson. Will Johnson, 4 targets, 2 catches for 16 yards, 1 touchdown rushing last season. On the same end, Rosie Nix, 3 targets, 2 catches, 16 yards, no scores last season, but a crushing block, which will forever be grateful to Rosie for throwing down in that Chargers game to get Le'Veon Bell over the goal line as time expires, getting them that much-needed victory. Out of those 10 victories, that was much needed. That's how they end up in the playoffs. Resiliency with this team, right? So Matt Spaeth wants another player, only 3 targets, 2 catches, 10 yards, no scores. Do we think that maybe like David Johnson could just fill a role blocking, or if Jesse James picks up some blocks in this offense, that he can't be any more productive than that? I really do think so. And I think some of those targets and some of those catches made, 60 catches by Martavis Bryant, I think 90 some, I don't have the figure here just off the top of my head, but 90 some targets, the ball's going to be around. And when you have these backs like D'Angelo Williams and Le'Veon Bell that can catch the ball, look out. Totally different dynamic than what you're used to. Helps keep those safeties honest. You still got Marcus Wheaton. You still have the GOAT, Antonio Brown. Not worried about this offense whatsoever. So, with that said, let's focus on the defense for a second. And some people have asked me why I'm so high on Sean Davis being a starter on day 1, or thinking that some of these rookies are going to start day 1. I pose the counter question a little as my answer. What makes you think that any of the players we have currently on the roster are so entrenched in their position that they are going to be a de facto default starter in that opening day 1 game? None of these guys. Listen, Artie Burns probably going to be competing with Ross Cockrell for a starting position. Do we think Ross Cockrell is entrenched in the default starter, definite starter? He's going to be the starter? I can't say that for sure. I don't think you could either. Sean Davis, the guy who I'm really high upon. Do we really think that Robert Golden is the definite starter at safety? Robert Golden probably has the best chance to be the starter out of the names out of these guys that I'm naming. That's going to be a position battle to watch. I do think both of those guys get on the field. I like Rob Golden. I'm telling you, pleasant surprise. A guy that's been sitting there waiting his turn. Remember, there was a guy like that named Cameron Hayward who just waited and waited and waited. And eventually he got his turn, and he's been a spectacular player. Robert Golden has that potential, but then again, so does Sean Davis. Javon Hargrave, nose tackle, maybe playing some defensive end. What makes us think that Dan McCullers, Big Dan, is he a default starter? Is he going to be the guy that's definitely atop those position charts? He will be heading into camp. That's how it works. But on day 1, wouldn't be surprised if Hargrave pushes. You just never know. I don't think any of these guys are set as being the guys who are out there as starters. And as far as these positions and these position battles go, I mean, it's really anybody's guess as to who's going to be the starter. But Artie Burns, let me share this with you. If I hadn't shared this again, I'm sharing it again because it's just so good. So Pro Football Focus college version, okay? During the draft, they tweet out, quarterbacks had a passer rating of 39.8, 39.8, when targeting Artie Burns' coverage. It's the second lowest rating among draft-eligible Power 5 cornerbacks. Somebody asked me who was number one. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have a subscription to Premier Stats from PFF. That's just the truth. But they put that kind of information out there. If he could translate the same type of success in the NFL, here's your shutdown corner, everyone. This is the guy right here. And last but not least, for my topics today, the question about marijuana. Yes, marijuana. Not my cup of tea, not something, it's not something that I necessarily feel towards criminalizing or anything else. Political thoughts aside from this, the question posed is, should it be removed as a banned substance from the National Football League? And this is the best that I could say, because some people are saying, hey, this is a better painkiller. I'm no medical expert. I don't know what it does as far as if it's addictive or if it's a better painkiller. Here are just the facts that we know. The United States, as a country, federally, and there's a few states that have made it legal, but the rest of this country, it is still an illegal substance to possess. If you end up caught with it, pulled over in Pittsburgh, like Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount were, you're going to be arrested, you're going to be booked and charged. So, with that in mind, maybe in the future, when it isn't an illegal substance to have, as far as, hey, you get pulled over with it and it's no different than having a loaf of bread in your front seat, fine, by all means, maybe that's something you should consider. Because would driving under the influence, smoking this substance, be any different than alcohol abuse? I mean, I'm no medical expert, but I'm going to say, one is legal, one is not. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think the only reason that we try to make this argument, or some people try to make this argument for the NFL not punishing players for this, is because some of our favorite players are being suspended and losing careers over it. And unfortunately, this is the only thing that I have said on the matter when it comes to someone like Martavis Bryant. If you're not smart enough to just lay off of this controlled substance so you can pursue your job, you can have a job and you can have a career, then maybe you shouldn't have that job or career, because I don't know what they're going to ask of you next. Are they going to ask of you to run every day, maintain a certain weight, lift weights, train somewhere in the off season, train with someone during the off season? When these demands are required of you as well, what do you do? Do you say yes or do you say no? And that's more or less where I'm going to leave it, because right now the requirement is no, do not touch. And if you do, then those are the rules. And they've already reduced these rules some, and players continue to break it. We see Josh Gordon in Cleveland. He's another one. It's unfortunate to see these guys just not complying, but for the time being, I don't think the NFL is ready to remove it as a substance. That'll be a hot button topic, not to mention the actual rules or laws governing it elsewhere as far as states that have not legalized marijuana. There may be criminal penalties for that. So the NFL should just stand pat for now. When things change later, maybe there's no longer a prohibition on weed, as you'll call it. Then it might be time. And you may find it more permissible. But you're still not going to see guys showing up drunk at the Steelers practice facility the same way you won't see them getting high and being there high. I don't know what people's angle are on this, but these are multi-million, billion-dollar businesses that'll expect higher from, bad pun, they'll expect more of their employees. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I think it's time to wrap this up. If you do have a chance, check us out over on Twitter. That is twitter.com/SteelCityUndergr, something of that nature. You can find it by just typing in the search box Steel City Underground. Or, of course, you could click the link in our footer on SteelCityUnderground.com. And you're going to want to do that just to catch what might I have to say about the Pittsburgh Penguins. And, of course, I might be talking some Steelers with Rudy, too. I can't imagine our love for Pittsburgh sports not mentioning something about them, and maybe even the Buccos as well. But until then, folks, be safe, keep calm, and just win Game 7, please. Have a good one.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.